Saturday morning, and here's Denny, ready for a productive day on the layout. Foam blocks, check. Tools in order, check. A calm, creative afternoon ahead. But little does he know what dangers lurk in the smoke.
So I need to contour this entire area with some landforms. As I'm trying to go through the list of things I need to do next on the layout, I'm very interested in getting the fascia installed and to get all the wiring hidden and the individual siding controls installed. So this is where I need to focus my energy right now, is to build out this fictional overpass, and that will then cascade into the rest of the scenic areas. So it isn't well defined on my little maquette that I built a few months ago. Definitely I have the water feature opening up into the face of the layout. I'm using a few cans of spray paint to try to figure out my sight lines. So when you're standing square to the layout, you can see the backdrop through that area there. Now you have to also take a look at what the view block is going to look like down the side of the layout here. Another detail that I just need to consider is that the bridge is supported on these stone abutments, and they will be buried into the hillside, as the speed square sort of indicates. And so I need to make sure that I contour the profile of the base of the hill around this appropriately. It just wouldn't stop flat, it's going to come out down to an area like this. So I'm mostly happy with the view block that I've designed here. It's not perfect, but it's going to work well for what I want. So the contour lines for the shoreline have been figured out. And now I'm going to start building up the topography around it. The approach I'm going to take to build up all of the landforms is very similar to working with, let's say, building blocks like Legos. Extruded foam is very expensive where I live, so I don't want to waste a lot of money by doing the wedding cake or the layer cake style, where you fill in complete areas with foam and continue to stack it. I instead want to do sort of a retaining wall where I break off pieces of foam every 3 or 4 inches and step it back and glue it so that it's hollow underneath, but I create the topography using small chunks of foam. I do have some offcuts from other layouts, and I've simply taken the foam and run it through the bandsaw to create 3-inch wide sections, and I'll use those as my building blocks as I start to build out the topography. I'll cut them with a utility knife and put them in place. So I know a lot of people that use either wood glue or white glue to put their foam together. It's not super strong, but it works okay. The most ideal adhesive for this job would be something called PL300. So some research has indicated that I can use Weld Bond. It is listed as an adhesive for styrofoam. It is clean, non-toxic, and it dries fairly quickly. This is a clean and tidy method for me to put the foam together. It'll be my first time ever using this, and so we'll see how it goes. This is one day's work. I got to spend a rainy afternoon down here and just kept cutting individual bricks, putting down a bit of Weld Bond, and just moving along and stacking and contouring. And right now I think the result is excellent. I'm very, very happy with how these things are progressing. You can see that from the front, it's difficult to see where the river meets the backdrop. Same thing over here, it disappears into the backdrop. And from this angle, you can barely make out the tunnel portal. So the curvature of this river or stream has worked out the way that I want it. As an adhesive, the weld bond seems to be working excellent. I did give this an overnight chance to cure, and so today everything feels rock solid, and I didn't use a huge amount of glue. I spread it on fairly thinly with a paintbrush, but everything is very well secured. I'm also building up the front of the layout where the fascia is going to be installed. I don't need to fill in this area, I just need to have the top area, and I think the fascia will stick well against the foam blocks as well as the wooden joists. For this I will use some PL300, but I figure I can put the fascia along, a little bit of PL300 and a screw into there, and that should be rock solid. Okay, so over the last couple nights, I've been able to build up the landforms here using that sort of Minecraft approach of stacking little blocks, sort of like building a pyramid, and I think it's turned out really well. I have a rough idea of where the landforms are, and I'm actually really happy with how things have progressed. So before I move any further around the layout, I want to get to the next part, which is actually shaping these hills. They're pretty rough, they're obviously blocky, and now I need to smooth them down. And one of the things I want to use for that is a very inexpensive hot wire cutter that I picked up online. I think this cost me about $10. It wasn't very pricey, and I suspect it's also not very good, but we'll give it a try. And with that, I had said originally how I had selected weld bond to glue this all together, and first of all, that worked out really well. Everything here is absolutely rock solid. It's set up in 24 hours. It's indestructible. I had mentioned I wanted easy cleanup, so on and so forth. I didn't want to use a caulking gun. The other thing is that I have used different hot wire cutters in the past to shape foam. And anytime I've ever used something like PL300, it forms a pretty thick layer of adhesive, and when you're trying to use one of these hot wire cutters, it runs into that adhesive and it really struggles to cut through it. So using the weld bond and brushing it on pretty thinly was my solution, so that while this is trying to make its way through the foam, when it runs into the adhesive, it doesn't get hung up on it. I've been experimenting a little bit with this hot wire cutter, and admittedly it's not very powerful, and this is a fairly thick amount of foam. A place like this where it's all stacked, I can take the hot wire cutter and I can lean it into the foam until I get far enough back that I cut through all the layers like so that it knocks off all of the high spots. So I'm also just going to try to move this along and see if I can actually cut out the contours. Actually, that wasn't too bad. So here is just a few minutes of carving done with the hot wire cutter, and I'm actually really happy with this. It's obviously rough. I'll take a rasp and maybe some sandpaper to it and smooth it up, but already I can start to see how this valley is shaping up, and it's actually really exciting. This has gone very quickly to get to this state, so I'm really happy with this. The farthest corner back there is exactly 4 feet from the edge of the table. I made that completely removable, so I'll be able to lift it off and put it on the workbench. I did not, however, make that hill removable, so I'm basically going to need to lay across the table in order to carve that up. And it probably goes without saying that you need to be safe when you're doing this sort of work. I'm certainly guilty many times of just jumping in and doing stuff. Cutting foam and the fumes that come off of that are not good for you. I really do recommend you get yourself a mask. This has got a 3M 6001 filter on it. This is really all you're going to need in order to keep yourself well, because you will get nauseous off of these fumes and it will give you a terrible headache, and let's face it, they're not good for you.
When shaping your landscape from expanded polystyrene, it may seem like innocent fun, but hidden within the cheerful white foam lies danger. Yes, EPS foam, when cut with heat, releases fumes. Not just any fumes, but the kind that tickle the lungs in all the wrong ways. That's why today's responsible modeler uses proper protection. The 3M reusable respirator, fitted with 6001 organic vapor cartridges, trusted by hobbyists, graffiti artists, and lone wanderers alike. Remember, Just because it's foam doesn't mean it's friendly.
You're probably looking at about $50 now to get one of these complete. The piece of advice I would give you, that you'll get anywhere that you look, is that these filters are always working, which means that when they're sitting out, they're still filtering. So in between uses, take them off the mask, put them in a Ziploc bag and store them to extend their life. And ultimately, once they're opened, they do expire. If you do get to try one of these and you're cutting foam, you will notice immediately that you're not getting the fumes and you're not getting that instantaneous headache. So yeah, be safe. So from the east side of the layout all the way over here to the west end of the layout, all of the styrofoam has been installed and mostly shaped. I'm leaving a few sections for when the fascia gets installed so I can figure out the contours, but everywhere else is basically done. So something that I would have done a little differently, and I'm going to try to fix now, is that if you take a look at this hill right here, I glued it to the tabletop. And so the trouble is I can't pull it back from the wall to carve it near to the top of the wall. So it's difficult for me to get the slope that I wanted built into it. If you take a look over here, that scenery block I made removable and I was able to carve that on the workbench, and I like the way it turned out a little bit better. So I'm going to make a change to my hot wire cutter so that I can shape that hill a little more to my liking. Okay, so there is the cutter before, and here is the cutter after. I bent it at almost a 45-degree angle. What I'm hoping is then that I can get up beside the wall and change the cut. We'll see if I wrecked it. Still works. I don't know if you can see it smoking here, but it's hot as ever. I doubt I would have a lot of luck bending this back to its original. Probably I would break that joint, but I've customized it to what I think I need. It's flaming hot, and it was only $10, so I'm going to continue trying to finish off these contours and see if this does the job. So I'm much happier now with the way that this hill looks. It matches the slope of everything in this valley. And the benefit is that the hot wire cutter is giving it sort of like a rock texture. This is going to be changed over time, but for the time being, it's quite convincing, and I'm really very happy with it. The last thing I'm going to do is just take a rasp and knock down the high spots. And do a little bit of blending, but I'm not going to overly work this. I'm probably now going to leave this for a while and live with it and maybe make little changes as I go along. So for the time being, this is great. I'm going to run the rasp over it really briefly, and I'm going to call this done. So that worked out really well. I didn't have a solid plan for how I was going to build up the scenery here, and truthfully I didn't really understand what it was going to look like. And when I take a look at the little scale model I have, I know I wanted some elevations, but I didn't really plan out what that was going to look like. So using the little blocks of foam and stacking them like bricks worked really well for me because it let me create as I go. I could move them around and get geometries that I liked and elevations that I thought looked good. And in my mind, that's a lot easier than having to cut up large chunks and try to fit them into place. So this was very successful for the way that I want to work. So in terms of the volume of foam, there's a little bit down at the far end of the layout, but most of it is behind me here. This works out to be 3 2x8 foot sheets of 1-inch foam. I'm hopeful that maybe this gives somebody else an alternative approach for how you want to build up your landforms. This was new to me, it worked really well for me, and maybe it'll work well for you. One last quick point was that I did in fact try to straighten out the bent rod on this tool, and absolutely I did break it, just as I predicted.
And so another productive modeling session comes to a close. Thanks to clear thinking and proper protection, the land takes shape, the air remains breathable, and Denny lives to model another day. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.